The first time I started to notice the crevasse I was very young, and I was the fat kid at school, and everybody would tease me, and I was relentlessly bullied to the point of almost suicidal thoughts when I was a child. And that was the first time I was seriously rejected from my peers. And it didn't help that my father rejected me too, and so this crevasse got deeper and deeper, and I thought, well, how can I fix this? How can I be accepted by my peers, accepted by my father? And that's when I started bodybuilding, and that's when I just thought, what's the toughest thing I can possibly do? Join the commandos, get my green beret. So the whole of my life, everything I did from then on was in order to fill the crevasse, that I felt this gaping hole inside of me from lack of father love, lack of peers love, and insecurities. And so I could actually look back at my entire working life, and literally everything I've done has been in order to fill the hole or numb the hole. After a while, I got all the accolades. I became super popular with my friends. I got muscles. I competed in bodybuilding. I got my green beret, became a commando. I achieved all of the things that I thought were going to make me happy, and I wasn't. But that's okay, because you then look at the next level and you go, oh, well, I'm not famous yet, and I'm not a millionaire yet, and I don't have a glamorous model for a girlfriend yet. So what if I go for them? Then I'll be happy. So that was what I put my 100% of my focus on. So all the energy I'd put into bodybuilding and becoming a commando, I now put into becoming famous and getting rich. And we did. I built up a career as a gladiator on TV show in Australia and America. We would sign autographs, and we'd go to fancy parties, and we'd hang out with Sylvester Stallone and Jean-Claude Van Damme and all the big names, Richard Branson, and we'd go to the parties that were in the papers. And all of this was a little bit more validation, And it was fantastic at first, because you really feel like, yes, this is it, I'm someone, I'm noticed, people want my autograph, and life was pretty sweet. Until you started to notice that actually it wasn't, and there was still a hole. And then you're starting to feel a bit ungrateful, because you're like, well, wait a second, I've got everything and I'm feeling depressed. Why am I feeling depressed? So once you realize that it isn't the money, because you've got friends who are much richer than you and they're depressed, and you've got friends who are much more famous than you and many of them were depressed. So I started to see this ladder that I'd been climbing as the wrong ladder. By then I'd realized that I had to probably take spirituality a bit more seriously, because clearly physical things weren't giving me any joy. And so I would my quest, it was as far away from Christianity as I possibly could. So I started with Buddhism and witchcraft and paganism, and hedonism was my favorite one, of course. And I was determined to be free. I've always had a massive desire to be free, to feel freedom. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew I'd know it when I got there. And so all of these things I've been striving for were all in a quest to feel that sense of internal freedom. And the less I felt it, the deeper the void, the more I struggled for it, and the more I destroyed my life. I got to the point where I was high enough up the mountain to know that those who were higher than me, and we knew people who went all the way to the top, were no better off, and in often cases worse off. And so I knew I was climbing the wrong mountain.
I've never really thought of myself as having a crevasse. I thought, I'm pretty normal, everything's fine. But when I look back, I have to admit, no, there was a craving. There was something that I was trying to fill. My father disappeared when I was young, and it was kind of a missing persons case, and I never knew where he was. I was only 8 years old, and for the next 20 years, I just assumed I'm just not worth coming back for. And it wasn't until I was 20 that I found out he'd actually committed suicide when I was young. And suddenly it repaired a little, knowing that he had left out of his own pain. But for those 17 years of just wondering why I wasn't enough, it started something in me, and it made me turn into a self-reliant little girl who was determined to never rely on anyone else. And that followed me for most of my life. What happened was I would shut my heart down, I seemed happy-go-lucky on the outside, and I had good relationships. I was married, but deep down, I was just not letting joy through my heart. And it shut everything down. It shut my creativity. It shut my friendships. And ultimately, it's the thing that almost led to my destruction.
We had been down the path of trying to fill this void, and the void was getting larger. We'd had very successful businesses, and we'd had all of the success that we had wanted, and I was becoming more and more broken, to the point where I thought, I'm going to either kill myself or by jumping off a bridge, or kill myself fixing this. And I read somewhere, or I was watching a documentary somewhere about ancient armies. And these ancient armies used to take their troops in a boat to the enemy's shore. They'd get them out of the boat, and then they'd just burn all the boats. And this really struck me in the heart, and I thought, wow, what kind of a motivation would you have to go forward if you knew there was no going backwards? And we were so stuck in habits. We were so stuck in the comfort of the pretty prison we had created for ourselves. And I just knew I couldn't escape this world that we were surrounded in, of adulation and excess. So I thought, let's burn our boats. And the only way I could think of this was, I turned to Bessie and I said, let's give everything we own away to poor people and find out if the universe provides. And which was my way of saying, find out if there's a God. And so we did.
Yes, and I had just given birth to my first child, so it wasn't necessarily something I was thinking of doing, and in fact I said no straight up. But I saw the sincerity in his eyes, the desperation in his eyes, and I'd watched the build-up, and I knew the life we had was going to eventually implode in our souls, and we were going to lose everything that was that we'd craved and that we desired. It was going to just ruin us. Emotionally and spiritually, and so I said, let's do it. Let's burn our boats, or whatever that means.
Yeah, so we did. So we put a clip on YouTube, and it basically said, we're giving everything away for free. If you feel like you need it, if you're in need, we didn't just want to give it to people, anyone. We wanted people who needed our things, and it was very gratifying. It felt like chains were being taken off us one by one. There's this domino effect of things that stop you, that fence you in from living the life God wants you to live.
So after we finally gave everything away, we then travelled for the next 10 years with nothing, and we went to 33 countries, and we literally would just arrive in a country and just say, what needs to be done? How can we be of service? And we would wash, and we would clean houses, pick up poop, look after kids, help people build their businesses, literally hang washing for a lot of ladies who couldn't quite reach the washing line. It was a period of completely shedding our identities of who we thought we were and all of our accolades, but it was so precious just to realise, let's just do what needs to be done, and let's just help people for helping's sake. It was gorgeous. We lived in a van, a small white cargo van with a bed in the back, and my daughter, from the age of 0 to 8, was living in a car and loving it. We would travel these countries and literally live with every different religion, Hindu, Buddhist, even hippies and witches and pagans and everything that you can imagine. We were trying to find what's the answer to this life thing, and where is their true love and where is their true happiness. And time again, they didn't have the answer until we moved right across the street from a church called Mariners.
So I would go for a walk every day, and I would walk up the hill right past Mariners, and I had this voice strongly say to me one day, you call yourself a seeker, you call yourself a scientist. What kind of a seeker and scientist are you when you won't even experiment by walking across the road 100 yards to sit in that auditorium over there? And it was really shocking that I was being challenged like that. And the voice went on. When I say the voice, it was like an internal pricking of the brain. And the voice went on to say, you've done some really crazy things. Because I'd meditated on top of mountains for days. I'd gone without food. I'd done crystals and sage and sound baths and you name it. I had tried it. And so that kind of caught my attention, and it challenged me to go and listen to God. So I went over to Mariners, and I heard the service, and I was interested that I didn't look at these people anymore as the enemy, which I had looked at Christians before, but I saw them very much as seekers like me, and that was that. But it got to the point where I was now torn between, well, what's truth? And it was getting really painful, and I felt like I'm almost back to the misery I was in before I started this, which surprised me because I thought this giving away was going to set me free, but it didn't set me free. All it did was break me free of one cage and put me in another. And so I said, okay, God, this is the last chance. I am going to do the craziest thing I can think of, the thing that got your attention the most in the Bible, which in my mind was when Jesus went and did 40 days and 40 nights fasting. So I locked myself in a room and I fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. And long story short, within a very, very short time, I was screaming and yelling at God, assuming there was one, because I hadn't decided that there was. And after about 8 days, the void, which I had felt for 25 years, suddenly before me, I saw it as a giant crevasse, like a giant piece of marble or granite that had been cracked all the way down to the bottom, so badly cracked that there were fissures and cracks that were tiny. I couldn't have fixed them even if I knew where they were, which I didn't. And that was powerful to me because I realized I can't even begin to fix myself. There's things that are broken in me that I don't even know are broken. How can you fix that? And right before my eyes, this giant broken, hugely deep, infinitely deep crevasse in my soul started to heal, and it started to come together like this, like it was being brought back together again. But the thing that really struck me was there wasn't gaps in it. It was as if it was melting back into its original form. There was not a single crack or fissure. It went all the way up to the very top, and you couldn't see a blemish on it. It was a whole rock. And I suddenly, for the first time in 25 years, felt whole. And I couldn't speak. I had been bawling my eyes out. I mean, so much so that my stomach felt like it was coming out of my mouth. And in that moment, the only thought that went through my head was, is that a miracle? I've spent so many years trying to fill that hole, trying to band-aid that hole, and God fixed it in like 3.5 minutes? What a waste of time. I couldn't believe the time I had wasted on all these other things. The next thing I thought, and this I thought was a bit funny, was I thought, oh no, does that mean I'm a Christian now? And it felt like this giant, cosmic, beautiful, loving laugh saying, it's so much bigger than that. And that made it suddenly all right. I was able to relax and release myself into this love. And the love, I have never, ever felt anything like it. If you've ever had a child that you loved with all your heart, and someone took that child and you knew they were being told that you hated them, and you wanted nothing to do with them, and they'd never see you again because they believed that you hated them. Can you imagine how heartbroken you would be to know the child you loved thought you hated it? That was what I felt God was saying to me. I loved you so much, and you thought I didn't. And it broke me. And to this day, that memory is a place I just fall back into. Whenever I feel any trouble, I fall back into that love, because that love was so wide, it was as wide as the universe. And it might sound like a cliche, but there was not a gap in the universe that wasn't filled with that love. So where could I be where there isn't love? In the depths of the depths, in the most miserable place, in the most heartbreaking place, that love still permeated all of it. And that was what I experienced in that moment, and that's what I hold on to. My feet feel like they're on solid ground. I'll never be the same again.